why you started drinking, right?
Yes, and Jared.
Seems like a good excuse.
Awesome, thank you for coming out to our city council work meeting for August 25th, 2021. We will begin with a review of this tonight's agenda, any items that we need to make adjustments to. I know that Congressman Burgess Owens will be here later, so we'll be taking some time to give him a few minutes to speak with us about 6:30, so whenever that cuts in, that's the plan. We don't need to do anything to the agenda with that, Jackie, do we? Okay. Any other items we need to make adjustments to? Councilman Henderson is on the phone. Can you hear us, Jared? Jared, are you with us?
Is our volume up?
Is our volume up?
Hello.
There we go. Alright, thank you. Jared, we can hear you now.
Took a seat.
Alright, we will, any future agenda items the council would like to have added to the agenda? Alright, leadership task list review, any items that we need that the council is requesting updates for that we haven't received already? Great, I like the way we're moving. We're gonna move on to item 2.1, discussion of a proposal by Soleil Apartment Holdings LLC to amend Title 10, Chapter 16 of Harriman City Code to allow personal care services and conditional use in the R215 zone. Michael.
Thank you. And, okay, we have a presentation. So this is a legislative amendment to our zoning ordinance. Received a recommendation from our planning commission. Some members of our city council are familiar when we worked with this property owner and coordinated a plan for development of Soleil Lofts. So tonight, what we're asking is whether or not this text amendment is ready for consideration at a future meeting for action. What is specifically being requested is adding personal care service as a conditional use in the R215 zone. In your packet, we included a segment out of the land use table. You can see that that service is currently allowed in the RM zone, which is residential multifamily, and allows for similar types of uses. What had happened is that when that developer put together that project, they had always intended to operate or offer services that would be operated by a third-party vendor. And so that third-party vendor was coming in and setting up their business, buying tanning beds and moving in, came to the city and was applying for a business license, only to find out that we don't allow tanning salons as a business in the R215 zone. So the operator of that new proposed business and the property owner, so they approached the city, submitted this text amendment. We reviewed it with the economic development team. They were supportive. We tried to write the text amendment with a condition that would be fairly narrow, so it wouldn't be something that could just go anywhere in the R215 zone. You see that it's limited to properties that are 15 acres or that have a proximity to the, has to be part of the management office. So there are a number of conditions that are required in order to have this service. But again, this would be a service that would be available for the residents of Soleil Lofts, as well as any resident outside of the project boundary that could come in and use this salon. Again, Planning Commission made the recommendation for approval. We did find that it was compliant with the intent of the zoning standards. And so it is before you tonight for further direction. You can see the kind of the limitations again on this slide of where it would be applied to.
Michael, the only question I had was just parking. Just if it's bringing in people from outside of our community, is there adequate parking to utilize for additional outside?
Yes, and we would still subject to any business license application to that parking study. But that particular project was overparked. Yes, they do have sufficient parking in this project.
That would be my only concern,
Yeah.
and with being a conditional use, it has to come before planning commission anyway, so so I'm fine with it being adjusted now.
And Sherry, I have the same, question you did. The one thing, the staff modification where it's attached to the main office or in a clubhouse, made me feel a lot better about it.
Sure.
That the parking around there is probably a little excess anyway, so.
That's where you see guest parking,
Right.
most likely for
So-
future tenants, so.
So that's my biggest concern. In regards to putting it, I don't have any problem with it. My issue is the parking as well. And that comes from the live-work units that we have over in Rosecrest Village. The parking often gets, there's a fight over parking over there as to whether or not it's the residents or it's for business use. And my concern is that, there's not a designated, what I'd like to see if we're looking at actually changing our code, would be requiring that there's a designated parking for that business unit that's separate from what's required for.
And I think we could do that. We could at least identify what are the stalls that are required for the use as per the code. And then require that they.
And require that they're signed as such.
Yeah.
That's my biggest concern, because, what we saw is we saw places that took over places that, you have your salon that's not that big of a deal, it's not an issue. It's not the salon I'm worried about. It's the, call center that came in and had 15, 20 employees, took up all of the parking spots in the area, and all the residents were really upset because that was their parking for their clubhouse and their amenity. And so that's what I would like to see, is just a delineation, and other than that, I don't really have any problem with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I agree with the sentiment behind that. The only thing that would concern me as far as signage is it's just really hard to enforce. You have to figure out always somebody there to make sure that who's parking in there really actually is going into there. It's really a hard thing to enforce.
Well, that's gonna be an HOA issue at that point.
Well, but if it's open to the public, is the HOA gonna enforce it? Who's gonna?
They certainly can, because this would be on private property, so yes, they could still
But
enforce
I guess
that.
that's the only thing, it's just like, is it gonna get enforced, is it even worth it?
Well, and
That's my only issue. I agree with the parking thing completely, but that, sometimes signage is just an extra
I would
cost.
rather have it in there and avoid potential issues as possible, and that be the issue, than just have nothing at all and say that, and just let it go, because then it will be an issue.
Understood.
That's I think where I would wanna see that call on that.
Maybe what we could do is have it be reserved for services available at the clubhouse itself, including this user, yeah.
Just as long as it's clear, so, cause what I see happening is a business coming in after the project is filled out, and now all of a sudden the residents don't have access to the amenity that they paid for.
Well, and this also protects the interest of the operator. If this space is being used as overflow parking or guest parking, and then there's no room for
Absolutely.
patrons that are coming to use the
Just
facility.
just designating it, I think is the biggest thing.
So I'm actually with Sully Lofts, and we have designated.
Okay, as a general rule during our work meeting, we do try to have the conversations with the council. Give us just a minute,
Perfect.
we'll talk.
But we can talk afterwards.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Any other questions or concerns about this particular item?
No, I think it's fine, I think it's intent, just make sure there's no parking.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
With that, we will move on to item 2.2, surplus property discussion. Approximately 0.59 acres located at 4345 West Sykes Lane, Lake.
I'm gonna stand up because I've been sitting down all day. Back's hurting. We'll wait for this presentation to come up, but the question here, before we get started, is just, there's a piece of property that is surplus, and we're just asking the council, well, an HOA has approached the city and asked if they can occupy or use this property for the purpose of parking lot. And so I'll go through some background information.
Wait, you just said it's surplus, did we designate it as
It is not
Not
surplus.
surplus, so it's not
It's
surplus,
Open
right?
space, yeah, sorry, bad choice of words.
I'm like, we didn't designate it.
No,
Did we?
it's not
Designated
surplus,
open
it's
space.
Yeah.
unused
asking us
property.
to.
Right, I knew they were asking.
Yeah. Good clarification.
Okay, well, is it coming up?
Just doesn't like you.
It's really slow.
I had a lot of pictures in
I
my
feel it's
presentations. This area is located up in Rosecrest. It's right at the end of Juniper Crest Road. There we go. So as we move forward here, you can see the location map. It's right where Juniper Crest Road currently ends.
Who's the applicant on this?
It's Sky Ridge HOA. I guess there's not a formal application, really, so, the requester, I guess.
Sending in requests.
So this parcel is 0.59 acres about, it's a larger parcel. And you can see is on this exhibit, the brown line is the future trail. Some of it's existing, some of it's future. This trail will go up and access up into the upper Juniper Canyon area. There's a large stormwater detention pond, and then the big gravel pit area you can see to the kind of left, or to the right, is the future commercial site for Rosecrest, and Juniper Crest will go down and curve around in there and then tie back into Mountain View.
And the swimming pool is the clubhouse or something?
Yeah, we'll zoom in a little closer and you'll be able to see in a minute. But yeah, that's the clubhouse for the HOA, which is to the left of this site. Let's see, I'm clicking it, but it's not moving. It'll probably go up like 5 slides now. But the next slide will show you the master plan for Rosecrest, and this area was designated in the Rosecrest land use plan as open space. So, yep.
It's open space.
As open space. So their definition in their master development agreement is pretty vague on open space. It's just area that doesn't have a building on it, essentially. So, and that's where the land came from. It was deeded to us in, I think, 2019. In your packet, there were the deeds of when it came to us. It was just a quitclaim deed, so the city found out they received it at the end of the year when tax notices came due, and we got something that said we didn't owe taxes. And then also Juniper Crest Road, this area, we're zoomed in, this thing's finally moving along for me. You can see the area right there is the open space between spots 36 and 33. And Juniper Crest Road sits quite a bit higher than the road inside the subdivision, Sykes Lane. And so this slide points out the approximate toe of the slope that goes along there. So that will need to remain as a slope or retaining wall to keep the integrity of the road.
So how high is that elevation change?
We got a slide coming up pretty soon, but it's probably about 10, 15 feet, I think. So the HOA has already had plans drawn up, had it surveyed. And so this shows the contours there. It's kind of small, hard to see, but I think those are probably major 5-footers, so probably about 15 feet from the bottom of that slope to the top of the slope. And this is the plan that they want to do. They want to put parking stalls and run them around the outside. They've had some issues with parking in this area. They are underneath the old parking code. I went and checked and they actually exceeded the old parking code. Every unit here has a 2-car garage and a 2-car stall in the driveway. And they have 62, I think, parking stalls for guests. So they exceeded the parking
I'm
ratio.
guessing the issue they're having is the parking at the pool itself.
Yeah, and I think some people just have multiple cars, and I think the issue might be people's garages aren't being used for cars, but.
The pool was what they had indicated to my staff,
You mean-
so.
You mean the random number that we pull out of an engineering book that says this how many stalls we have could be a little below what is the actual habits?
Are these people using the clubhouse? Is that the problem, that they're coming down and parking at this clubhouse and they need additional parking for it?
What I got told from the applicant, or whatever you wanna call him, the person requesting yesterday, is people's trucks are too big to fit in their driveways, cause they're all driving really long trucks, and they're sticking out the road, so they're parking elsewhere.
And
They're
they're-
parking in this lot
I
currently.
could see in one of your pictures, these cars parked there.
Yeah, they're already parking.
Yeah.
And this is, let me, how long are the driveways, just out of curiosity?
20 feet.
So they're not required to maintain the 24-foot that's standard now?
No, this is under Rosecrest. This was built and adopted before the 24-foot standard was even adopted in the city, so.
Yeah, I know. I was just pointing it out.
So this would develop 22 more parking stalls in this site.
Who's paying for it?
They would. Pros and cons of this request. I think these are the same ones that are listed in the staff report, but you know, what is, I guess the question is, what's the purpose of this open space? Currently, it's not being maintained by the city very well. I don't even think we knew we owned it for a while before we received it, before we were notified we owned it. And it's currently being used as a parking lot already, and so do we need to enforce that? Maintenance requirement currently, the city is doing it, but the HOA is willing to take it over and maintain the entire property if they can use it as parking. And there is existing encroachments, so here's a picture standing on the parcel looking at the townhomes. Then if you go over towards the clubhouse and look that way, this is what the parcel currently looks like. The property line is the back of curb.
Are all those curbs like that, or is it, this is the only place in there that the curbs are?
They all have low back curbs.
They're low backs, okay.
There's no park strips, so
You put, what is the purpose of this open space? What is the purpose of this open space?
I think that's the question for the council, asking the council, what's your desire for this open space?
You indicated a trail right there, the brown trail. Do we need parking for that trail in the future?
Yeah, that's my big question.
That trail is part of it breaks off from the Juniper Canyon Trail system. And so
Can you
I'm
go
not
back to that?
aware if there's a parking lot planned in this area. There's parking along Juniper Crest that we've always planned for that trail. This would be, if it was, there's all the options of deeding it to the HOA or doing a revocable permit that could have restrictions where they could, you know, maybe enforce on the property to just people in their HOA or not allow parking for certain times, or the do nothing option.
Blake, was this open space counted, how was it figured? Was it counted as part of the requirement for this specific development? Is it factored into the whole Rose Crest? How would that affect what their open space dedication requirement is?
Great question. I ran a quick back of the napkin calculation. It was part of the overall Rose Crest open space, and they're exceeding their 20%. So it won't take them under, but I don't know how much it takes them down.
Will they have to make adjustments down the line to basically absorb the loss of this as open space?
No, because they gave it.
They already
met
gave it
the
to us.
As long as
requirements,
they
and
still
then whatever
maintain the
we-
20%
Whatever we
overall.
decide to do with it, if we decide not to use it as open space, they've
Got it.
already met
That's
the
on us.
requirement, would be, I would contribute that.
Let's go back to that.
For what it's worth, I can't see any real public use for it, with the big slope and the limited space. I mean, I guess you could put a little playground, but that would be an HOA thing anyway, so I think it's totally fine for parking. I'd look for what staff recommendation for the best process to go through, whether that's limited permit or just deeding it to them or whatever.
So the only issue I have about it is, first of all, I never think we have too much parking for trails. And so if it's gonna be right next to a trail in the future,
That's my thought.
should we have it for that? The other thing too is it sets a precedence if we're just gonna give away property, or I should say give it away, but then every other piece of property that next to somebody, they're gonna come and say, just like we were discussing in these other encroachment and things like that, well, you have this trail that you guys don't maintain, why don't you just let me do all this to it? We set precedents for everything, and so if we say, yeah, HOA, go and do all this on it and utilize it, then how can we tell a resident who sits right next to a trail that they can't put some nice grass along it or something? It just feels like it sets a clear precedent.
I
Well,
think, oh,
sorry, I think the way I read this is that they're asking for us to surplus it, which then it would have to basically go out for a bid, right?
they,
To purchase, or are they wanting us to
They want
quit?
us to
the
abandon.
original request was surplus, because that's what they were thinking. When I spoke to the gentleman yesterday, he said, we're totally good with a revocable permit. We'll pay to do all the survey, all the work. We'll build everything on our own dollar. And if you guys ever need it, you can come in and take it out. They were okay with that option. They liked
Yeah,
that.
and the other thing too, and I'll ask you, Chase, when we were talking about doing those, the parks down on the water district property down there, we talked the same thing. We could come in there and at any point you guys can come in and take it back. And they were absolutely very opposed to that because once you get established on there, it becomes somewhat of a legal loophole to jump through to get your property back. Is that the case?
I think the scope of it's a little bit different here, right, because it's such a smaller thing, and the use is a little bit different, right, this is simply just parking.
But how much would it cost to develop that? There's a pretty good cost to develop.
There is,
a parking lot, right?
and that's one of the things that you can do with a revocable permit is require, not only that they pay the full costs, but that they post some sort of a bond that we hold in trust that would be released if and when we were to ever say, all right, we need it back. And if you don't remove those improvements, if that's part of what we're asking them to do is remove the improvements and they don't, that bond then becomes the security for us to go in and do that.
Sure.
So, and that's just one possibility, right? If it's beneficial to have that parking lot and we just say, thanks for putting it, we want it back now. We own the property, right? They're putting in a parking lot on our property is essentially what they're doing.
So back to your point then, Blake, even though they originally said surplus, they really would like us to retain the ownership and then just pay for all the improvements.
I think they're good either way, but I think they see the surplus option being a long drawn out process and the other way being a write up an agreement, sign it and go and do it.
Is this, and this was from a representative of the HOA, not just a specific?
Yep.
Okay. My 2 cents on this one, I'm not super happy with the request to get rid of the property, especially being that it abuts a trail. However, I would have no problem with them installing parking in the area and using it as long as that parking was designated as a trailhead. I mean, we can have anybody park in a public trailhead as much as they want, as long as,
I just don't think that's a trailhead.
The one thing I'm concerned about with that.
It's just near a trail.
is the access to that is on a private road. So
Yeah.
now you've got a little blend of, it's strange and that's
That's
not
fair.
desirable, so that's,
no, that's a fair point.
If they also, if we retain the ownership, they are unable to enforce parking there, right? That would be a city parking enforcement issue.
But we would be able to if we start having issues.
We would be the only authorized parking enforcement. They could not, right?
But if it was private, we wouldn't be able
We
to.
wouldn't.
So it's either they can enforce it or we can enforce it, obviously, right? And so I prefer, I have a hard time, I agree with Sherry, I have a hard time setting a precedence that, hey, this was the open space that we're giving for this community, now we're just gonna let the community take it over and have it as theirs. We haven't done that in the past, as far as I'm aware, and I would have a hard time saying yes, letting them improve it, as long as we continue to retain the rights and and they maintain it. It's still our property, I don't necessarily have a problem with it.
I guess I don't see how that's any different than a residence coming to us and saying, hey, we wanna do this really cool thing right here along this trail. And we've been saying no, we've been saying don't encroach upon the city, so to me, it's like sets a precedence, how can we say, yeah, do all these nice improvements on this, at any time we can come and tell you to rip them out? It just seems like it sets a precedence.
So if I may, it's actually the policy you have coming in front of you tonight about encroachment would cover these kinds of things. There may be a time, you look at it and say, it doesn't harm the city to allow that parking there, we're not gonna surplus our property, we're not gonna give it to you. We're gonna allow you to use it, and maybe, we're hearing parking complaints, all right, parking is a valid use, okay, we're gonna let you do that without doing it. So there are times you might allow an encroachment, there are legitimate times where the city may say, okay, we're going to let you do this, but here are the rules to it. And then we have those that are just beyond,
Blatant.
where they're essentially turning it into a private use and nobody can use it. I think as Chase, the city attorney has said, if somebody came and parked there to use it for the trail, there's probably nothing the HOA can do. I think what you'd more likely see, given the way we are today, is people from the HOA would drive from their house over to their department to then walk on a trail.
In all honesty, that's what I see. And so, yeah, technically it's not a trailhead, but
It's easy access to it, so.
Just, it's the way we are now.
I will refrain from making the comment that popped into my head.
Easy word.
I also think there's some kind of a reasonableness evaluation, like what else are we gonna do with that property? how else could it be beneficial to anybody? The big slope, the angle of it, the maintenance of it, it's not an objectionable use. There's just a lot of make sense to it, right? So.
No, I think we have a lot of properties like that in the city that's like, oh, why do we have this?
One other consideration that I haven't talked to Blake about is you could deed this to them with a reversionary clause that said if it's used for anything other than a parking lot, it comes back to the city. That shifts it from us, gives it totally to them, but then again, limits the use of that to that parking lot, subject to that reversionary clause, which would kick it back to them.
Because if they take care of it all, it's still a public parking lot, and then and part of the agreement would be they would be required for maintenance and everything,
So
But still accessed by a private street is.
that's the bigger issue. They could close it off by simply closing the private street. Like, there's nothing we can really do with, now, can they close off that street is a whole different argument,
I
but
think their plat dedicates it for, the public to cross over and drive over.
Yeah.
But when you start introducing a overuse on it, then you might run into complaints about, wear and tear and who's
oh,
gonna
we
pay for
absolutely
it.
will. So the other issue that I think is almost the more pertinent issue, I don't have a problem with the HOA coming in and making this request, I think that's fine. I don't necessarily have a problem. I lived in an HOA where we did something similar with the grass next to the trail, and we agreed to maintain it along the ravine, over by Rose Crest Village. So that doesn't necessarily bother me too much. My bigger concern is the open space calculation. And how is this, if we start allowing this kind of stuff on a regular basis, all of a sudden the yes, this is only a half acre, but if this is a half acre and they do a half acre on the other side, the guy across the street does a half acre, the guy down the street does a half acre, all of a sudden we're reducing substantial amounts of open space, which in all honesty really isn't open space, but that the builder got credit for, or the developer got credit for. And I have a problem with I have concern and pause, not a problem, but concern and pause with doing that, particularly with the rules that this particular developer uses in regard, because of the length and the time frame of this particular development agreement, on doing that. This particular development agreement allows them to do things like count the space between driveways, even if it's only, a foot and a half wide, they get to calculate that towards their open space. They get to calculate basically anything that's not designated a street or a piece of cement as open space. That's not open space, but they get to calculate it, and then we get these remnant pieces, and then we get, so by the time that we calculate all of those things in, the actual true open space to what we have now, and yes, they're vested in those laws, but the actual open space that these residents are getting is substantially smaller than we expect in any other development in the community.
I agree with you, which is why we're trying to fix MDAs going forward and not do that. But in this point, they're saying we're gonna keep this open space, doesn't hurt the developer, and it doesn't help the neighbors, right? There's no principal win there, like we don't gain anything.
But to your point, the reason that we ended up with that parcel is because
It counts as open
They
space.
couldn't do anything with
they
it.
couldn't use it.
Right.
They couldn't use it, they didn't wanna have to pay to maintain it. And so it was put in and shown as open space and then deeded to us.
So that it was
Without even telling us.
And
Not even telling
we
us.
didn't even know that, which again, isn't the first time that that's happened.
And for me, that I don't necessarily mind it, like taking it in this specific situation. I would like there to be some more clarification on, because when we do this kind of stuff, Sherry's absolutely right, we're setting precedents, right? I would like there to be more clarification on exactly how this is being accounted for, how this is being accrued for in the overall project. And yes, the developer gets to count it, but I think there needs to be a running tally or something so that we know what exactly. I mean, this is a half acre, but I'm sure we're gonna get a lot more of these, and I'm sure it's gonna start ending up in the range of some substantial acreage that we're losing, that we're open space, that we're giving up an open space in this area. And that is what bothers me more than anything else, is the overall long-term effects of having this process happen time and time again.
I think the best step forward is whenever there's requests to amend that MDA in the future,
I've tried.
we fix that definition of open space.
I think
Or
there's
we
a reason
don't.
they haven't made the request in 4 years.
Or we don't
But this is
change
gonna
it,
be
you
a
know?
parking lot, an open parking lot, it's gonna be the space, this is actually.
We have a parking lot and a lot of their open space for their parks and areas, so,
Yeah, trailhead would count
yeah.
towards open space, yeah.
Yeah, we've got the Juniper Canyon trailhead that's,
I'm not suggesting that it's like the proper trailhead, but if it's access to a trail, people will use it, cause it's like, well, instead of starting down there, let's crawl here and hop on,
those ones are typically public, so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good
I
point.
don't know.
So before I would be comfortable approving this request, I would need more detail on the overall impacts of doing this, cause to me, as I look at these requests, with the one we just had about changing our code, I'm not looking at the specific, I'm trying not to look at the specific request, I'm trying to look at the overall impact to the city. And if we continue to look at one-offs and never actually look at the overall impact to the city that we're having by making a one-off request every time, we're just gonna continue to go down these paths of not having sound guidance in our code as opposed to.
I think a lot of that will be addressed with the policy that comes up later
And so for me, this might be slightly ahead of the card.
Well, so this is a work session to see if you even want it, they've approached us saying, hey, we wanna do this. And so it puts staff in that position, okay, how do we?
Yeah.
Actually, I think they started writing several of the counselors, so,
Yeah.
okay, let's at least tell them we're moving some processes
For me, again, I don't disagree, that's why I asked the question early on about the open space component of that, because that detail wasn't in there. And I think we do need to have a little bit more clarity on that, but overall on it, as we talk about really kind of the options in front of us, whether it's a revocable agreement or deed it with a reversionary clause, I would look a little bit at Chase on the, I have some concern of having a revocable agreement to where it's still ours and they do all the improvements on it and just any of the legalities that come in that, rather than just saying, being very specific, deeding it to them with a reversionary clause that says, you can use it for this, but as soon as it's anything different, then it comes back to us. And in the meantime, it's all on them. And it's all on them to maintain, to pay the taxes, whatever it is. I like that clear delineation between those responsibilities.
And in reality, I mean, let's be clear, if it comes back to us, we're just gonna, leave it as a parking lot? I mean, there's no real other use for it, right? I mean,
You could require them to remove it if
We
it
just-
comes back.
yeah, remove
Enforcing
it so that
right.
we can have our open dirt there for.
But again, that's
Natural vegetation.
But I agree, there's really no other use for it. And again, that's kind of like, that's why I would like the clear delineation, that it's yours.
Right.
Until such time that you try and change what you do with that,
Or fail to maintain, yeah.
then it comes back to us, but beyond that, it's yours, we have no responsibility.
I don't have any problem with what Clint is suggesting, as long as that requires maintenance,
So somebody
maintenance as
doesn't
well.
come in 6 years and go, hey, we got a plan to put in 6 foot lines there.
Cause that's exactly what's gonna happen.
So typically with like a revocable permit, you're not thinking of something quite this large. It's usually, when I envision those, say it was their property and we had the property below and they wanted to put in a retaining wall to do something that was partially on ours and theirs, and there was actually some value to the city, hey, we're protected from slope. That's usually when you would use that kind of permit. This is a little unique, and maybe the reversionary deed is the better option if that's where council wants to go. Cause then you could say, you gotta do at least some xeriscaping on this, so it's not just
Well,
what it
again,
is now.
I think
Natural
there-
natural
vegetation.
vegetation.
well, and to the point that, there's a slope there for a reason, so that all has to be engineered, that all has to be maintained for the slope of the road, so there's things in there, and it will come at their cost to do it, but again, I would prefer the clear delineation that says, this is yours to do this,
What's that?
and here's the parameters you work in, if that changes, then it goes away.
I'm gonna add another layer. So serious. I know, I'm sorry. You could, subject to it,
Not the brown.
going down this reversionary clause deeding pathway, you could
So they're gonna do the,
have them execute an agreement wherein they agree to install certain improvements beyond the parking structure, parking stalls, such as landscaping. And upon completion of those, it then becomes, their property. Right, if that's another layer that we were trying to.
I would suggest that there's a reasonable discussion to be had there,
Yeah.
right? That if you just build in a parking stall and you just leave weeds in the hill and stuff, that's not very helpful either. So something that makes it,
Beautifies the
beautifies
overall
it,
scene.
improves it, make it better, right?
Yeah, I have, again, all the maintenance is on them. Whatever that is.
Did you get the direction you need?
I think we have some direction, we'll move forward, it's gonna have to come back to
It's
you
gonna come back,
for a
yeah.
decision anyways.
Alright.
All the work is falling on Chase.
I was creating work for myself, but I just kept going too.
You did, you just,
You think you'd have figured that out by now, but.
I'll learn one of these days.
alright, discussion, item 2.3, discussion pertaining to the distribution plan of incoming ARPA funds. Tammy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm gonna try to talk without coughing. We'll see. Again, sinus cold, so I get nervous.
Sorry, Nathan, I'm coming this
Revenge.
Tonight, staff is seeking guidance from the council on the most effective and pervasive ways to utilize funds received from the American Rescue Plan Act. And we'd like to place focus on determining projects of interest to the council and how those eligible expenses should be prioritized while providing a high return on investment for our community. Harriman City is scheduled to receive $4.8 million from ARPA funds. That will come in 2 distributions of $2.4 million. One of those distributions we are looking to receive any day now. We're not quite sure where it is. And then the other one could come within the next 12 months. These funds must be spent according to the rules that were put in place by the US Treasury. And they need to align with the categories of decreasing the spread of COVID-19, strengthening vital public services, economic stabilization for businesses and households, and necessary investments for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. In your staff report, I worked with Alan and Blake and Justin to put together just a list of projects that staff feels would be eligible, just to give you an idea of the types of projects that you could consider. And then today there was a meeting regarding the local match that the state is putting together. They are putting $50 million into a fund that will allow local municipalities to apply for, that will increase the bandwidth of their dollars. So they can take their ARPA funds that they've received and use them as matching funds and submit applications for all of their projects for this grant match. Or they can use their ARPA funds completely separate and still apply for these grant matching opportunities. And your match can be like labor that goes into it. There's various different things that can be counted as part of your match. I'm trying really hard not to cough so that Clint doesn't scoot even closer to our city manager. So I apologize. So I don't know if you had a chance to go through some of those projects that we had listed, and if you do have questions about those projects, any of us are willing to answer any of those questions that you might have. But I think this is a good time to kind of hear some of the ideas for projects that you have in mind.
I have a question, and Councilman Henderson sent a text asking about this too, is there were comments in here about UFSA might have, or UFA might make, give us a bill for a portion of this, is that right? Can we discuss that a little bit and what that?
That's my question is, not only USFA, but, or not only UFA, but all the other taxing districts, cause I could see if UFA does this, the sewer district's gonna wanna do it, the garbage district's gonna wanna do it, every single one, and I'm confused as to what the reasoning behind saying that we need your road infrastructure funds for this, for us. Because it's my so I don't know, what information can you give us on that?
Yeah, were there grounds for assessing us,
And what grounds do we have to say no?
we get a percentage of your?
They don't have an ability to assess us, they can ask us for a payment.
it's a request and you can choose to deny the request or approve the request.
And the reason they're asking is they're not recipients of any of these.
We did turn down their last request.
On the CARES side of thing, right?
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry to interject, and I know Nathan listened to the last board meeting as well. That was the case with prior funds. It was a request. This time around, it is more of a demand. If we don't voluntarily use this money, then the board seems in line to vote to require those members that did not use the ARPA funds to pay the equal amount in a special assessment for their budget next year.
Do they have,
That discussion was very, very concerning. I hadn't seen the invoice that they were referring to, but that was the discussion amongst
How
the
much
board
are they
members.
asking for?
We haven't gotten it.
Yeah, we have.
I guess,
There's no.
I mean, look,
I guess the other question I would have based on.
$25-30 is fine. Like, I don't think there's.
Based
a
on
problem.
Jared's comments, I guess the other piece that, what grounds or legality do they have to assess a special assessment?
Yeah. I would be curious.
There's a lot of components to that, and I understand that they're not a recipient, a direct recipient of any of these funds, and so I get it, and they have things that they're doing COVID related, obviously, but again, when it comes to infrastructure, I do have a concern of them trying to tap into money that is specifically, CARES fund was one thing, and I, when we did some accommodating there, this I think is a lot more specific to obviously local government and obviously infrastructure, and so I have some concerns with, I guess, the reasoning or the thought process behind what they would request, how much they would request, and what that would be used for, because I don't think we have any of that information currently in front of us.
No, they
Well,
have.
I have lots of problems with that as well, Clint. What it sounds like is that the majority of the board members are on board with this. If the board votes for it, then what do we do? So I guess maybe it's more of a question for Chase, is where does that put us? Again, being in an organization where we're just plain outvoted and we have to pay them what they want. It's really frustrating.
The one question I would have, since they're a contractor to us and we collect the money, they would have to show some value received, or we would have to see what this value is, and they'd have to make a justification before they can just.
Yeah. Or an additional expense that they're incurring as a result of all of it.
Yeah, and
And
why
their expense would have to
the
align.
expense would be
specific to Harriman?
specific to Harriman and not.
When you're a contract, how can they just unilaterally change a contract? They can't do that.
Yeah.
We are a contract agency, not a member agency.
Yeah.
We're totally contract.
So I think that deserves a lot more investigation of.
And I'll go through that interlocal again with a more fine-tooth comb, looking at it through that lens and be able to come back and report on that.
It seems like they could cancel out the assessment, cause we did at the garbage district, I think a lot of the districts did, here's our absolute cost because of COVID. And then they just said, here's your percentage, and they can demonstrate it that way. I think that's probably the way they would do it.
That particular district did two different ones, and they came back on the second one and said, oh, we're wrong, we shouldn't even assess
Yeah.
that.
Done that, right?
Yeah. Like I say, I think there's a lot of more information that's really needed to have a true discussion of what that means.
Well, and frankly, the city, if you chose to pay it, you wouldn't have to use ARPA funds, right? You could pay it
Right.
however you want for that
So
service.
it's just,
And
do
I
we
agree
really
on-
have $4.8 million to work with? I guess that's the question, right? I mean, there's, $15 million of improvements listed here. We've got $4.8 million. We can only stretch that so far. But
And
if
if
it's
every
only,
single
Yeah.
partner is
Every-
asking for 150 to 500,000, guess what? There goes all of our money,
right,
right?
that's,
I don't think you have to pay them, but we'll let Chase.
Yeah, we'll let them on that. In terms, go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna say, this is really an opportunity to say, what kind of things do you want us to spend this on? You'll have to approve each of these projects as they come. We do have to tell the treasury where we anticipate spending them, and I don't know if that's detailed project level or if it's kind of in these categories.
It's categories, they've got 6 pages of categories, we have to divide it up on how we're gonna spend it.
So,
We have to tell them that by August 31st.
August
so we need some direction on how you wanna do this. Those categories, there's 6 pages, but they're somewhat broad. This is the first tranche of money, you'll get more money. I'm assuming they'll allow you to do that again because the money's coming at different times.
So we just have to designate the 2.4 now and the other 2.4.
Yeah, and yeah, so that is what, I think Alan's correct, that's what we believe. These rules come out usually a day after everything's due, so.
Does this,
Now, one more thing to note is on the local match, the deadline for that is September 15th. So we have to submit projects by September 15th or we won't be able to
There's-
apply.
50 million across the whole state to match
50 million.
Yeah.
everybody's project. Great.
So again, getting into,
We're not
I
doing
guess,
that.
Yes, those projects that show the highest level of local involvement obviously are more likely to be approved, but
so getting into at least a little bit of discussion on the projects, obviously, I think the intent of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, and I think we all would agree, we wanna get the biggest bang for our buck out of this money and do it. So we need to find some type of a project that has, or projects, hopefully, that has further reaching benefits to our community and how we use these funds. I will just share with you that, one of the projects that's listed on here, again, wasn't specifically related to this item on here, but it was talked about at the sewer district yesterday, and one of the items on here is the Innovations District Sewer Line Project. That is on their capital facilities plan for them to put in, along the Midas Creek drainage there. That's one that there's a reimbursement agreement in place that the district has signed to be part of. I think as we look into, and one of the other discussions that came up with that particular project yesterday is that we know the line in 118th currently would have to be upsized for the potential growth out there. So one of the things that they are looking at is taking this project, what is required, and then the sewer district combining with us, obviously, and upsizing that line to take the pressure off the 118th line and not have to dig up that line and replace it. So when you start to talk about partners and far-reaching benefits, and this opens up obviously a quadrant for more innovation district development that we hope to be able to do stuff to Rio Tinto property.
So the idea is we can spend $2 million and get $5 or $6 million worth of benefits, something like that, right?
Or we may only have to spend $1 million
And still get.
if we can get some of the grants
Yes.
and the participation by the sewer district. Again, as we talk about the project in totality and trying to be most bang for our buck, I see that as, there's a lot of great projects that we know need to be done on here, but I see that as a project that really, again, when you get partners and things involved, that's what the state's looking for on the matching funds. We have a great opportunity to try and get some there. I just think that's one that has a lot of benefits potentially to our community. Not that the other ones aren't just as important to get done, because we have a lot of those needs out there. Again, I just see that is potentially one that comes with some clear benefits to it.
so I agree with you there. From a larger scope, from 30,000 foot view, whatever you wanna call it. I would like to see exactly that, the funds being multiplied as best as possible, specifically in the way that helps develop future growth, or economic growth of the city. So if we are, because that's really the ultimate driver, right? If we can drive economic growth in some way with these funds, it becomes a recurring, or a recurring benefit to the city and not just a one-time use. And so,
As we work with Go Ed and EDC Utah and have these sites that at that point are really shovel ready because they have all that infrastructure in place, that opens up huge opportunities to us.
and so for me, the places that we could get the most bang for the buck, but specifically the places we get the most bang for the buck where we are basically prepping the prime areas that would allow us to get the most economic development in the city, that to me, so I'm thinking the auto mall, the Innovation District, those kind of places are the places for me that I think I would be most willing to see these funds spent, because I think it's where there would be the most benefit long-term to the city.
I have a question. Justin, I first of all would wonder, what about secondary water? There's a lot of our residents who don't have access to secondary water, and I know a lot of this money could be used for things like that, which would really greatly benefit the demand on our culinary water. Have we looked into, is there some good secondary water uses that we could get set up with
Yeah,
this?
we have plenty of those. It was just, we were thinking that we were going more along the lines of culinary potable water.
Okay.
Because it didn't specifically call out which, and I assumed that culinary water is gonna fit the bill more than secondary.
I was just curious because the more we transfer people onto secondary water, then a huge benefit comes back to culinary water. The other issue I have with, and I agree with the concept of trying to get partners and make our money go the farthest possible. The only issue I have is Innovation District. I don't understand, to my knowledge, the only Innovation District we have is Bullfrog Small, right? And there's only a couple little pads there that are even in Harriman. The rest is not even in our city. So it concerns me to put several $1 million putting out there, hoping that that will come into our city when we have needs in our already existing city. We have Old Town Water Line, 1950s and 1970s. The problem with those types of pipes is they leak. And that culinary water that we're supposed to try and keep and capture, that's where you start having big problems with those. Is I'm not saying that they're leaking right this second. That's when you start to see everything fail. And there'll become a time that we don't have a choice but to fix those because they're gonna fail.
Nathan clarified today, 1950s isn't old.
Not for infrastructure. For water lines, that's pretty young.
And to be fair, Sherry, I did not.
1850s.
And to be fair, I did say earlier today that if Justin said that it would get secondary water to my neighborhood, then I'm done, that's my vote.
Anyway, those would be the things I would wonder about is secondary, because it does really relieve a lot of pressure off the culinary according to everything I've been taught.
So they did talk about secondary water today. It would be much lower on the list. They would obviously take culinary water projects that are improving the water system over a secondary. They would scrutinize secondary more, but it doesn't mean that they would completely rule it out. But it would definitely fall further down on the list.
That's really weird to me because it seemed like the governor was trying hard to focus on those types of things. So it's odd to me that the state is turning a blind eye to the things that he's trying to recommend.
We talked about this just a little bit before. I think you might have stepped out, it was after the audit. Nathan made a really, I think, a very valid point to be brought up here, and I agree, getting people onto secondary where we can reduces on culinary, but there has to be a corresponding mindset. It's not just, okay, you're not using culinary, but now you can use as much secondary as you want. We still have to really drive home the water conservation component of that too. I think it's all a hand in hand together to really get the benefits we need.
Yeah, that's
And
why
they did
metering
the
on
water
secondary, those
or,
types of things are critical too.
That there are water programs that will help with those, with the secondary water concerns, and so I think today on the meeting, they advise people to go that route first before pushing them through this way.
Tammy, can you talk, one of the other things you have on here, I know that was really successful during kind of the height of the pandemic, but it's the City Shop Around program. You have that on there. Can you just talk a little bit to what we're hearing from our business community right now? Is there a need to look at, again, some of the money to help stimulate that growth there? Where does it kind of fall based on what you've heard in terms of priorities in, and maybe getting some matching funds, those types of things, but, cause again, I wanna do everything we can to support our local business. And we've done that in the past. Where do you think that ranks right now in terms of kind of priority?
I think right now our local businesses actually seem to be doing fairly well. I put this program back on just because you have done it before, you know the success of it, and the fact that it reaches more than one group. So this reaches all of your community, your businesses and your residents. And of course, you can always fluctuate your amounts that you offer should you choose to do that, so that it's either lower or higher. The highest amount that we did took about $1 million of our CARES Act funds the last time that we did it, but the first two rounds were under $500,000. But again, it's on there just to kind of get your mind flowing on other projects that you might want to consider, or of course you could choose to do that one again. We also have the economic development assistance. We did recently just obtain services from the retail coach. It is $35,000. And so it does count as an eligible expense, and that would help offset the costs that economic development wasn't necessarily planning on this year. So they were going to give up a few of their other things in order to cover that expense. But if some of that could be offset with these funds, that would be helpful as well.
Seems like a reasonable allocation and not a
It-
large
it's
percentage.
minimal.
Yeah,
too.
no, I agree. I
And,
think that one's a no-brainer.
You know, I know, Nathan, you sent out a bunch of information earlier today, skimmed it, obviously didn't have time to dive into it, but there looks like a lot of really good information there. I mean, it really looks to be money well spent, and again, I think it's a minimal impact to the overall that we're talking. I think that
He showed that Anthem is doing really well. It is a draw. We actually draw from other communities in Anthem, largely due to Winco. And so
Yeah.
it's been a great
The ice cream shop
asset
should be
to
bringing
the
some people in too, that place is great.
It's always
Liberty.
busy too.
I know it brings Teddy in.
You know it's
Yeah.
8 minutes now?
I know, yeah. I got my shovel ready.
Good shit, already.
Anyway, are you looking for direction on like what types of projects we have to designate either sewer or water or that, is that?
And I think it's kind of that higher level, we're gonna have to weigh in some of these, you may take some money and say, let's put it towards that. We have to spend these funds by end of 24. So just before the next election, there has nothing, I'm sure there's no rhyme or reason to that, but we have some time. So we'll have to work through some of those, but they have to be spent, not just allocated. And so that's why you look at projects that you've already kind of been flushed out, but it does give us some time to look at it and say, if you were gonna do, say, a water line, how much could you do, where of that line is actually the most logical place to start? If you're gonna redo a road, you wanna do that line, those kind of things, so. That's, we are hoping to get some direction, from council. This is your opportunity to, if it's that high level, you wanna spend some on economic development, you wanna spend some in water. The one infrastructure you can't spend it on is streets. They were very clear about that. There's no way and frankly, all this stuff showed up right at the end. The water, the wastewater, and the broadband, which is another category you can spend, showed up right at the end in a rider in the Senate, and it just went through. I'm not sure which senator needed that for the vote, but that's really what happened as you followed that bill go through.
But a road could not get COVID.
A road could not get COVID, so there was no way to say your roads were impacted by COVID.
I do have one question, and I think this really would depend on the council as a whole's direction, but the internet committee task force had kind of gotten to a point where we were going to be making a presentation to the council on some recommendations or some options. Depending on which one was chosen, some of those funds could help with getting some of that started. Maybe it would be good to revisit that or update that and make a recommendation, cause there's a lot of needs, but there are areas of our city that don't have broadband internet, and it makes working from home, telemmuting, kids going to school, whatever that stuff is, more challenging. And I think it would be an economic development tool for parts of our city as well, so.
So the concern I have with this right now is that how detailed do you have to be? You have to say, yeah, we're gonna spend $4.8 million on some of these projects. I mean, how detailed do you have to be? Because we can't even consider that if we don't have any clue about it. And it's, what I mean? So
Yeah, I would look to Alan, cause I think he's looked at those 6 pages. How much detail are they?
They're broad categories, just what kind of thing are you gonna do? Are you gonna do economic development? Are you gonna pay for, the safety supplies or
Do they require you to put a dollar amount in it?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the problem,
dollar.
because it's
Kind of
like,
It is
if it was
dollar.
broad,
We're
you
gonna
could
put
say,
this
yep,
much
we're gonna do all
for
those, and we ended up spending $50 on water and $5
But
billion
is
on.
broadband
However-
just considered infrastructure?
It does appear that you can adjust it as you need.
You adjust it as you
Okay,
need.
so that's good.
Broadband
So
was
putting
one of
it
the
down
categories
doesn't
specifically
lock it
put
in?
Doesn't lock it in,
So
You just have to-
For the loan match, that's very detailed.
yeah.
Right,
got
but we
it.
have
Right.
another
Say-
couple
Totally
weeks on that, cause this is like
Yes, but do we have another meeting before that?
before
We got
September
one,
15th.
You have,
Yeah,
yeah,
we
you
have
got
one.
it.
September
Yeah.
8th.
But all of the applications will have to be completed
Basically
and
ready to
in
go.
by the 15th.
I'll just throw out my 2 cents and then I'll be quiet so everyone else can throw in. I would say obviously, the economic development assistance stuff that I think that's a small amount, no brainer. Helps offset some of the things that economic development was gonna put off in order to come up with those funds. I still would like, I think, at least to designate or at least put on the list some money for a city shop around program. I still think there's huge benefit. Maybe we bring that down a little bit so it's not the million, maybe 500,000. Cause again, I think, and maybe, we do that as we get close to the holidays and stimulate things there. And then, again, things that will help in economic development. And I think that, again, I understand your point, Sherry. I still think that the sewer line in the innovation district should be looked at, and also the stormwater over in the Auto Mall area are two things that we could look at. And again, hopefully try and get some matching funds for it and be able to increase our reach on both of those.
If I could just make sense, I guess that's the question. If we can get matching funds, that seems like reasonable places to allocate those funds. If we don't get matching funds,
Then we have to pare it down.
yeah, I'm not sure that's the
So
right
I
places.
think-
Does that make sense? Like, if we're multiplying the money, that's great. If we're not multiplying the money, we may have to be more
I
choosy,
think
you
what
know?
you could do is kind of state how much money you would designate, maybe, with the 2.4 million that's coming with this first distribution, you could maybe state for the report where you would like that. Maybe you want it all to economic development, maybe you wanna split it between economic development and infrastructure, maybe you could take the 35,000 for the economic development assistance and some portion of one of the other projects and stick it on that. But then we apply for the matching funds on all of these projects, see what comes of it, and then whatever's left over, that now you have all of those dollars to distribute
'Cause
to
we-
additional
We
projects.
can apply for multiple projects.
Yes, you can
for-
apply for as many projects as you want. It doesn't mean that they'll all get selected, but that increases your chance of projects being selected, and then you'll have a better idea. And I am pretty sure that
So-
he could go back and edit the report to state that we did receive matching funds, so now, this has kind of changed how the money will be allocated.
So we take $35,000 off the top and take the rest and proportionally allocate it to the other projects, apply for all the grants, and then see what we get. I like that idea.
Cause you'll come back and you'll have to.
And then we adjust whatever we have to do.
And he can actually just give it percentages based off of applying for grants, so this is going for this, so we only need this
I like that
percentage. And then are there any other projects that you feel should be added or focused on that the team hasn't thought of?
The only thing I would say in contrast to the shop around, I love the shop around program. It was great. It was very out of the box, creative thinking, divergent thinking, however you wanna look at it. Great job on that. The only reason I'd be hesitant on that this time is because I feel like that's what the CARES Act funding was for, was to get the economy going and things like that. This money right here scares the bejeebies out of me. Our grandkids are gonna have to pay for this and things like that, and that's concerning to me, huge concerning. So if we're gonna be forced to take the money, we better make sure we're putting into something that's gonna be a long-term benefit to us as a whole community. And that's the only reason I would hesitate on the shop around program. There's also I saw even on my app, on my bank thing, it said, hey, the checks that you're getting for your child stuff is gonna be late. And I'm like, so we're already putting checks in people's banks for that kind of stuff, whether they ask for them or not, so I think that we have to be so careful about continuing to interject fake money into people's pockets. And so that's only hesitant. I love the idea of benefiting our businesses and things like that, but I think it's time for people to get back to working, paying your bills, trying to recover from that kind of stuff. And this money should be spent for long-term infrastructure that's gonna be a long-term benefit, cause this is not free money. Our grandkids and their grandkids are gonna have to be paying for it for a long time.
So
I think that's a very fair point, Sherry.
I'm in agreement with Sherry on that one. I think that this is infrastructure dollars, not, I think that I don't have problems with the $35,000, cause I think there's some benefit we can get to help guide our infrastructure on that. But
That's a really good point, is that
that
economic development needs could help us prioritize infrastructure.
and that's where I see that being beneficial, right, is that it's helping us prioritize the infrastructure projects, but I do see this as an infrastructure grant more than I see it as a economic boost. And so can we use the infrastructure to boost our economy? Yeah, that's the ultimate purpose, right, is that we can use it to overall benefit our city long term. But I would agree that I would rather see the long-term boost as opposed to a short-term gain. Not that, I loved it, I thought it was fantastic and I supported it every time we did it. But the other concern that I have, I think is in some way aligned, is how many times do we do that before we can't do it anymore? And are we gonna get to the point that our residents expect it? Cause I've worked for companies that they do a Christmas bonus every year, and even though every year they say we're not gonna do a Christmas bonus, it comes anywhere near Thanksgiving and they haven't been talking about it, and all the employees get really, really upset. And I would hate for our residents to start counting or relying on that for, say, Christmas every year, when that just isn't a feasible reality for our residents. And we're not, I don't think we're in the point that we were a year ago where everybody desperately needed help.
I have no argument against that, like I say, it was
It was a good point, though. If it was different money, I'd totally be on
It
that.
was a great program, so it's like, yeah, let's do it again, but
It was
it's like,
successful, yep.
But it does take a lot of the dollars that can go towards some of these bigger
the other-
projects.
Yeah, I agree.
The one thing
That's
that I
true.
would ask, and this is maybe a question for finance, how much tax benefit did we end up getting out of that program?
Well, we had $1 million roughly, so 1%.
I mean, you probably got more than that, but they spent $1 million with the
those.
bucks.
Well, that's true, that's half of it.
But they might have spent $2 million
They went to the
total.
store.
I mean, it
But
just
we're looking
depends
at a
on
4 to
what
5%
they
benefit,
spent.
not a, like only 4 to 5% back to the city, so it's not, okay, that's what I needed.
That's still pretty good.
I mean, great, but still.
So, and as we spread this out, should we put a little bit into the broadband bucket in there? And if we decide at some point it's
And
just
then
not
if it doesn't
feasible, we
work
take it
out.
out?
Cause you can just pick it out, reallocate it somewhere else, right?
I'm fine with
I'm
at least
only-
looking at it.
Yeah, I'm only half joking that the rules come out the day after everything's due.
Yes.
But
Oh, we know.
It's,
Oh,
this
I
is,
know.
this is.
We've been
this is
getting
crazy.
updates
I think it would be
constantly, too,
appropriate
and it's like,
to allocate a certain amount, just a
A little
placeholder
bit, a
bucket,
placeholder
right?
of a smaller
And if
amount.
we needed to adjust it up,
Even if it's just
That's an
for infrastructure planning.
right, just,
Yeah.
yeah.
But if
I'm
it's
fine with it.
placeholder, then I'm great with any of them. Placeholder in each category, then that
I
way
think we're
we
saying
have a
that
little
they're,
bit more time.
they're all
couple,
placeholders
then we
until
have-
we get the match back and
Yeah,
figure
we
it
know
out.
when
Yeah,
to do it.
right,
Yeah.
I like that.
Good with
Well,
that.
and it's mainly a division between economic development and infrastructure. So,
I'll put a bunch of stuff in there.
Just Jared, do you have any comments? Are you
Work your
still
magic,
there?
Alan.
10 minutes.
Fast fingers.
Just making sure.
I agree with the
then
notion
that
that the
can-
background was good.
Jared, are you trying to chime in?
Sorry, I thought so you could just ask me
I did.
my thoughts. I would just agree with the notion that the CARES Act was different, right? It was a different time. We had businesses that were shut down. We were trying to get people acquainted with those that were open and get people that were afraid to go out and start going back out. That's not the case this time, and the funds really should be used for all of the other things you guys discussed.
and then we're in agreement that on the projects, we will submit for match funds on all of those projects.
Absolutely. Why would we
Did you
request
hear
anything
that,
less?
Justin and Blake?
Guess how many applications you guys get to do?
Oh yeah, can we get that internet thing tomorrow?
As long as we just send an
Tomorrow morning at
application, get
7:30
money,
a.m.
it's
No
good,
problem,
right?
And I think we could probably even put together some sort of application for broadband, but I think we would have to pick an area
an area
Mine
and
is good, 7,300 plus.
Butterfield Park has been one that Alan consistently knows.
We don't have connection
Yeah,
with
we-
our other people.
If you open it, if you do it right, you could open up that entire area. It's
Yes.
a lot closer for your spectrum, or your
Connections.
Xfinity or whatever to say, okay, now we're gonna.
And so we could put together some numbers for that as well and submit and see what happens.
Okay, I like it.
Thank you.
Do you have the direction you need to move forward on the tight timelines?
I appreciate that. That was very clear direction.
Alright, so we have approximately 15 minutes or so. Our next item is the Harriman City pay scale for police officers. Do we think we have enough time, Travis, to start getting into some good value there? I'm stalling to see
Just a
if the
question.
congressman's outside, and it looks like he is not, so. Okay, so then we'll go ahead and go.
All right, let me give a quick update on kind of the landscape of what we're seeing with police departments and policing. Right now, of course, across the nation, a year and a half ago, we saw a big shift in what the residents wanted out of their police department. We saw a lot of defunding that came through. We saw a lot of concern with government entities on what the police is doing, and you know what ultimately happened, right, is you created a distrust. The media, of course, didn't help with some of the stories that were coming out, and we just didn't quite know which direction we wanted to go, but that distrust created a lot of early resignations from the police department and people not wanting to go into the police field. So that's where this slide kind of starts out, right? The demand for police officers started being higher than the supply because they weren't getting people that wanted to be police officers. And you think that affected nationally because ultimately what happened was without enough police officers in these communities, crime rates went up and these cities were wanting to refocus and reinvest in their police force, but it's hard to get back that trust. And how do you get back that trust? Well, you pay more to try to bring those police officers back. And I think that's what we're seeing in the market. And I think we saw that here in Utah initially with Salt Lake City, who kind of started this market adjustment. Salt Lake City had anywhere, depending on who you talk to, 60 to 100 allocations. And they were trying to get new police officers back to their city, and they had a hard time recruiting those police officers. So what did they do? They ended up raising their wages. Trying to get people to come back into their city. So they took a pretty good increase of, I think, 15% for their police officers, Salt Lake City, 15%. They were the ones that started this. Now, we were hoping they were going to be a little bit of the outliers. They made some comments about being the capital city and paying capital wages. And we thought, let's wait and see where the market kind of comes down to, and maybe they're going to be the outlier within the market. But then we saw some other cities who kind of started saying, well, we're starting to see some success with Salt Lake City, and officers wanted to come back there. Well, we have a lot of allocations too. And the next city to jump on board was then West Valley City, the second largest city in the state. West Valley City then increased their police wages by about 15%. And at that point, we have two outliers, and we start wondering, is this really where the market's going? And cities started having conversation, HR department started having conversations. What are we gonna do to keep up with the market? And we saw some other cities then start jumping on board as well. South Jordan jumped on pretty quick and increased them by 10%, West Jordan by 12%. And then our new outlier was South Salt Lake just about a week ago that increased their wages by 30%, leading the market. And the other concern behind that as well is we're concerned that Salt Lake City continually wants to lead the market, and so they might then readjust and jump South Salt Lake, creating some more market adjustments. Now, we haven't completely heard from where Murray, Lehigh, Cottonwood Heights, Draper, and Riverton's probably gonna be pretty close to South Jordan, I think, from our latest information. But all these cities have contacted me saying, where are you at? And we're heavily looking at making an adjustment. Now, our current philosophy. Oh, go ahead.
Market equilibrium, right? There's an economic principle here, and it says if somebody jumps up to a high rate and everybody jumps up to match it, you're right where you were with just higher wages.
Right.
Right? And then if somebody still is trying to fill allocations, they're gonna go up, forcing everybody else to match, and then you're still at equilibrium with even higher wages.
Yeah, but eventually that'll push more into the market. I mean, that's eventually what happens, right? More police officers for more money because more people want to join the police department because it's better pay.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that I always think that police officers should be paid well, cause they provide an unbelievably valuable service, but the problem with it is, if they would have raised the culture at that city, then this pay thing wouldn't have been so out of whack, but when you ruin the culture there, then you have to all of a sudden pay something enough to entice them. And what you need to do is just make sure that your police officers are valued and your culture reflects that. Sorry, that's my public comment on
Right.
that.
Here,
Amen.
I absolutely agree, Sherry.
So in our previous discussions, we wanted to be at the top for our police officer salary. We didn't want to be the top, we didn't want to lead the market and push the market necessarily. But I think we want to be in about the top third of the market, and we're definitely seeing with these increases, we are falling well below that. And especially if these other cities make increases, we're gonna be well below that. So Councilman Henderson brought back a great question. He said, well, what about our benefits? How do our benefits play into these market adjustments, and does Harriman City have enough benefits maybe to counteract some of these increases that we're seeing? And I'm gonna give you some of the details, a little bit later. I didn't necessarily wanna go through all the nitty gritties in this meeting. But a quick observation from me is health insurance premiums, the negative there means that other cities actually pay more or a higher percentage of their health insurance premiums than we do. So I think that's a place that maybe we're behind the market a little bit in, but I don't necessarily think that's an issue. Because moving down the list, our health insurance coverage is at least equal and maybe a baby step above what some of these other cities are doing. We really do have a good plan through Select Health. Our dental insurance, I think, is pretty equal. Paid time off accruals are very similar across the board, to be honest. One thing that we do have, I think, that outweighs other cities is our 401k or 457 match. We're at 3.5%. We're seeing a lot of cities that are below that, and I think that's a little bit where we make up the difference, maybe.
How
with
much
insurance
below?
premiums. So I would say there's a lot of cities doing 1 to 2, and even some cities doing 0.
Okay.
I'd say we
So
look
yeah, that's
pretty good.
substantial.
Social Security opt-out, most cities have opted out of Social Security, however, there are some cities that are still in Social Security. We do see that as a benefit to our employees. But across the market, we're probably pretty comparable. Employee Assistance Program, we're pretty equal, gym reimbursement, tuition reimbursement. And surprisingly, maybe this surprised me a little bit, but most cities out there are actually giving an additional amount to police officers who are in tier 2 versus tier 1 to kind of bridge that gap between the benefits.
Shocker.
So really big overview, right? Local comparables. I think some of the cities have, and again, I think we're very well within the market. These are small steps that I think they offer a little bit better benefits than Harriman does. South Jordan, West Jordan, and Draper. I think we're very equal to Salt Lake City, Murray, Riverton, and UPD in our benefits. And then maybe a couple cities that have lower benefits than we do are South Salt Lake and Lehigh. And again, I'll send you these numbers maybe in a little bit more detail. And I know this is small, but this is kind of what it looks like. I did a comparison, but then I also have the exact numbers from the cities that I think I can provide. So Harriman City's there in the middle in green, and then how do the cities compare specifically in these categories to Harriman City? This is the recommendation. Again, I think to be in the, not leading the market, but in a place where we can recruit well and keep our officers well, is to match very similar to what West Valley City has done. So this actually step proposal matches what they've done. This would, right now we're an 11-step program for our police officers. We'd actually get rid of the bottom step. And what that would do is that would help us recruit more entry-level officers, which is what we're really looking for as a city. We have a lot of experience right now in the police force. We're a little bit worried about turnover and retirement on the upper end. But we're really trying to recruit those newer officers to keep our police force strong and keep them here. So the cost of this recommendation is about $300,000. Now, there are cities anywhere from 1 million to 8 million that are going through these budgetary changes. And some of these cities have been very strategic to say, we're gonna put out our plan July 1 or even July 10th, so that other cities, we already know that their budgets are in and approved, and they're gonna have a hard time kind of making up that gap.
Travis, I am gonna actually hold you off for just a second.
Okay.
And I'm actually gonna invite Congressman Owens to come in. Come on in. Congressman, come on in.
Hey guys, oh my goodness, packed house. How you guys doing?
Congressman, thank you for coming, we appreciate it. Our council members, we have Clint Smith,
Good to see you,
Sherry Warren, Stephen Shields, Mayor Watts, and we have Councilman Henderson on the phone. So
Wow, guys, well, just wanna stop and say real quickly hello, all right? And, let me just say this, this has been 7 months for me, been here for 8 years. I've never been more proud to be part of a state in Utah, seriously. I grew up in an awesome community in Tallahassee, Florida in the 60s, and we believed in faith, family, free market, and education. Does that sound familiar? All right, so it's, to be here and be fighting for what we all believe in, for this culture we have that literally is leading our country. So I just want to thank you guys for everything you're doing. So we have to just make sure that get more people engaged. We all know that now. More just normal people, get off the sideline, out of the stands. We gotta get on the field and let's get to work, and we'll get things done. Okay, so just want to come and say hello. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Appreciate your time.
Good luck with your city council meeting.
We'll need it.
We'll need all of you.
What's that?
Anyone thinking for the work on the frontage road? Sorry, cause I had to go out, but someone
He
thinking for the work
really
on the
did,
frontage.
yeah, he really did give us an opportunity, it was pretty quick.
Alright, sorry, Travis.
Want me to continue?
Yeah, please,
So,
sorry.
so part of what we're already seeing right now is we have a few new allocations that are budgeted this year, and we have one officer who's left us for the private sector, two officers who have left us for the private sector. And what happens in the recruiting, what we've done in recruiting for law enforcement is when we opened up a position, we created a list and ranked our candidates. And we've hired some of those candidates, the top ones really, and then after this environment has come out and we have these new open allocations, we've actually reached out to a couple of these other candidates on our list, see if they're still interested, and we've lost some interest because they're seeing these other cities pay more than we do. So we're already seeing that this is impacting our recruiting efforts.
The private sector security pay is very much out of whack with these kind of wages though, right? I mean,
Yeah, we're not.
we can't really hope to compete there, right?
Sure.
No, and it's those other things we look to compete for. But what was interesting was I've lost 3 now, 1 to another police department, which was a first. 2 just this week have resigned to go to private sector. And it's not security work, actually.
That's what I was gonna ask.
It wasn't. And the interesting thing was we made a phone call, which I've done in the past, and it's always my first, second, third, whatever. And they're saying, yeah, I've been waiting for this phone call. We'll be there Monday. Both times they told me, the first thing they said, what's your top out? 3730. We're not interested. Thanks. But 2 of them in a row, one of them didn't call us back. So this is the first time I've experienced that. So
Because we've always been at the top end.
we were the second and now we're at the bottom and they know that. And when you're talking the difference between $10,000 and $12,000, you bet they're gonna go to South Salt Lake Valley. And we thought about what you said, Sherry, and that was, we are a better place to work, we have a better environment, we have a better city. And all those things matter up until it's dollar bills.
Yeah, you have to pay your bills.
And they will go to a place like West Valley in South Salt Lake, that's a much harder environment to police in. But if they will for $10,000, you bet they will.
For sure.
And so I am nervous that I'm gonna start losing more and more. I haven't had these many resignations in a row. You've seen my reports in the past. People don't leave us. And I've experienced this now, so it's real. And they're leaving us.
Yeah, I don't have a problem paying police officers. I just think it's unfortunate. There should be a combination of
So
both.
interestingly enough, one of my law enforcement partners in this valley, the only one that can have a CBA, has a 1% ratchet to it. So if anybody beats them, they automatically get another 1%. And I've been telling the other chief, stop. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Because it
that's a
becomes
big
this and we become California, right? But we're in a situation now where there's basically 2 types of pay that's going on, as Travis has indicated. The West Valley model, they call it, and the South Salt Lake model. They both spend the same dollar, they just spend it different. And I disagree with how one of them is being spent. They collect money, they hand it out per hour, and if you warm a seat, you get that dollar bill, and I don't believe in that. The West Valley model is based more on a premium service. Officers that can get a master officer will get more money. Those that don't, that warm a seat, don't make as much money. But they'll stay for that. Does that make sense? So they'll stay for that dollar, because you're creating that positive culture and that ability to rank up without having to become a sergeant or a lieutenant.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm afraid I'm in a little bit of trouble.
got a couple of thoughts here. Obviously, public safety's the realm I'm into, and certainly I know none of us want our city to become the training ground, for someone to come in and then pay the money to invest in them and then have them taken away from us. And to your point, appreciate your comment, Sherry, as far as, you know, the work that they do and what they're paid for. I absolutely agree with that. You know, I think when we started the police department back a couple of years ago, our philosophy was then that we, taking all of those things into account, we wanted to be in that kind of top third tier. We knew that that was a good spot to be able to recruit people and to retain people, because we knew that the city had other things to offer than that top premium pay, which again, I don't think that's a place that we wanna be because of what it creates in the marketplace.
I don't think we need to be there.
Yeah,
We
and
have other things
again,
that
that's it,
offsets
that was just it back then, is we knew we had other things to offer
And we
that
got
made
it.
it, and we got it, that made it worth being here, and I think we're where we need to be on the benefits side of things. And so for me, I don't think that I'm gonna change that early philosophy that we had to now, and that is that I think we need to look at what it's going to take to put us back up there, in that top third tier, because of the other benefits that come with working here. I'm not one that, there's always gonna be some individuals, and they're in every agency, that will continue to chase the dollar.
Sure.
And quite honestly, those are the ones that usually we're okay. They're not invested in what we're doing as a city and as a department anyways. They're gonna chase a dollar, and you're gonna have that. But we need to make sure that we keep those to a minimum, and so I'm supportive of doing that. How we get there, obviously, is the question. Obviously, we know the dollar amount is gonna take with the proposal that's up there. Again, having set this up the way that we did going in and setting up the HCC to collect those dollars specifically for law enforcement and those types of things. For me, I wanna do everything we can to make sure that we don't overspend the money that's coming in through HCC that starts to negatively affect the general fund for other projects and our capital projects and those types of things. And so, for me, yes, I wanna look at a way to bolster what we have, but I think we have to do that within the confines of the budget provided and collected through the HCC, that we don't allow that bleed out to start affecting other huge priorities that we have out there. And that's probably gonna require, honestly, working and going through some of those proposed increases that you had as far as personnel and those other things, and figuring out how and where we can retool to make sure that we're focused first and foremost on the core and keeping a strong core, and then we look forward of how we again start to increase services from there. But again, I'm very hesitant to look at saying that I'm willing to expend money out of a different fund in order to support what we're collecting and should be supported through HCC.
So, finance, can you tell us other than just the 300,000, can we support this through the HCC funding?
Well, we could use, there is a small fund balance in the HCC that could fund this.
What does small mean?
We've got almost $1 million. We've been saving roughly $250 a year, less than what we trying to protect.
And we looked at it, we know that in salary savings so far, cause we haven't filled any of the allocations, we'll get to about 100,000-ish when we can make this move. So that's a piece of that off the table. We also know that the funding district will grow, right? And what we would give them next year in their typical market may be what they get now. And there may not be movement in the future, if that makes sense. And they know that. I've met with them and we'll send that message out. And there might be some operational money that we could utilize for this, but I'm concerned, and so that we know, Chad Miles, who just came out of the academy, by the time I get him in a car alone, which will be November-ish, I'll be into him $100,000. If he leaves us, that's real money that went bye-bye.
That's what we need to avoid.
Yeah, and our laterals that I put in, I just put 2 laterals in, they cost me about $20,000.
But Chief, if I can make another comment there. Besides the $100,000, I know the officers that you hire, the people that you bring in here are, any of those that depart is a loss for our city. Not just in $100,000, but in the character and quality of
Do we have?
Because it's that culture we want, right, that we build, that's what I look for.
I really like the police force you put together. These are great men and women, and we are grateful for their service. We do not want to lose them, and undermine and dilute the culture that's been established. So, seeing as there is a fund balance in the HCC, I would, really support us moving forward with an appropriate wage increase for the time being. And then we need to look at budgets going forward, make sure that we're not, okay, we can do this for 4 years and then we're screwed again, right? We need to figure out a way to make this a sustainable thing, and some of that's through the growth, some of that's through budget tools, right? We just wanna make sure that we don't exhaust that. We'd like to keep building that fund if we can, right?
Sandy came out with their plan a couple days ago. They're using ARPA money, this latest ARPA money to do that. But they're talking several $1 million that they have to increase.
Yeah, but that's one-time money.
That's one-time money.
How do they account for the
Right.
ongoing?
They're saying that, we hope we get that tax increase. And I just,
That is not what I wanna do.
No.
So
I will be very clear,
I
that is
think
not
we're
what I
much
wanna do.
smarter, and I think a key piece of this is to say that our department was paid so well that these 15 to 30% increases these other agencies are having to make, ours is 4.5%, 5%. To get to being back at the top third, in fact, we would be about number 3 or 4.
So I think that's.
So this is a little dollar that gets us a long ways because we've stayed ahead of it.
I think that's the thing there is more than anything else is that we're seeing this list and I'm guessing a lot of people are thinking this is not a 15% increase.
Not for us.
Not for us. This is a
4.5 to 5.
4.5 to 5% increase, which is way different than what these other cities. We're not looking at a 30% increase. So
We will be the
Considering
lowest
the increases we've seen in wages across the board in the last 3-4 months, 5% is.
I can't.
Well, and that's how you have to stay current in the market,
You do.
because if you fall behind, that's where it costs you.
So
big
where
money.
you and I both worked for districts at one point, or for county, we did this no wage, 15%.
Yeah.
No wage, no wage.
And what I've done here, as you all know, has been 3%, 3%, and it puts us in a much better position. Our neighbors, we will be the lowest increase of everybody so far. One of our neighbors will be about 360, another one was a little over $1 million. Just our neighbors here, our partners in this area. So to say that we're that close, I think we're in a really good position. I can work with Alan and make some of those numbers come through.
Yeah,
And
so here is, we'll bring you back a plan at a meeting.
A plan of how to
Yeah,
move forward.
Because
So,
I don't wanna do something that exhausts our fund and puts the HCC at a deficit in 4 years, right, or
Absolutely.
3 years.
And we did a
That's a
5-year
bad plan.
projection on this. It does cost, obviously, that raise will cost that raise
Sure.
every year plus
year
some,
plus.
right? And I would say this to the council, I'm burning on borrowed time right now. I have gotten word that there's a couple other people that are looking at this big pay increase in another city. Now, typically, those are the ones that worry me, like you have mentioned, but in this case, we don't have many of those people that jump around. So,
Yeah.
I
don't think there's any, I'll just speak for myself, I would never be opposed to keeping our police officers in line with what the market shows, and in addition to keeping a good culture. So I would hope that you'll convey that
we got good guys.
that we want to be fair.
My biggest concern right now is I got turned down twice now. That's
Yeah.
just,
Jared,
that's trouble.
I wanna give you a chance to speak up. Do you have any thoughts or inputs?
No, I think you guys have covered most of it really. I mean, stay within our means, right? I don't wanna have to be talking about a tax increase in the future if that means that we maybe hire one less person next year to spread that cost out. And whatever we need to do there, but I think everything we discussed is reasonable.
So, sounds like you.
One just very quick comment, I just wanna make sure I get on the record, and that is that from speaking only for me, I wanna make sure that we try and be as consistent as possible as in looking at job descriptions and market values across the city, and not make this obviously just that all of our people are valuable to us. We recognize the immediate challenge that exists, but I know we're gonna have some of those challenges in other areas too, that we need to be just as willing to look at down the road.
Thank you.
Those will be difficult challenges.
I was very upset with my peer group when this happened on July 10th. Because nothing looks worse than coming back to say, I need more money for people, on July 10th.
Yeah, right after the
Right.
budgets are done.
And we didn't start the problem, we have to deal with the problem.
So-
Nathan and I have had
so-
several conversations about that.
So can we make the next meeting? Are you guys ready to?
So I'd like to just comment here real quick, cause I've been pretty quiet, I wanna make sure I talk about this here real quick. So in regards to this, I just wanna make sure that I'm on the record as well. I've talked to you about this directly, chief, I have no problem with this increase, I think that it's more than fair. I trust the staff that we have between Travis and you, chief, to make a fair recommendation, and I also trust that our officers are gonna to rise to what we expect of them. And so every time there is a increase in pay, we expect that they provide the service we expect from them. I have no doubt that they will do that. They've already been doing that. There's no reason to believe they would do anything other than that. So it is, yes, I am in agreement as well that we move forward with this so that we do have that our officers know that we support them. But I also agree with Clint that we do need to make sure that we are planning for the fact that this is gonna hit us across the board. This is not just gonna be we're feeling it the most in the police, but the wage increases that we're having are gonna hit us across the board. And we need to start planning on that as well, so I wanna give
How
that,
often do you track that?
So wages across the city every year,
Every year?
we make adjustments.
so I just know that's gonna be an issue and I wanna make sure that we're
So
starting.
this really
to
is
plan on
our recommendation, and we don't have anything else
But
to bring back.
Police is not the only area we're starting to see
We're gonna see
deficit
that.
in workforce and what's having to happen in terms of attracting people.
So as far as getting this done in a timely manner, as Nathan, I cut him off, are we gonna be able to get this done for our next meeting so that we can get this in place?
Sure.
Does the council have any problems with seeing this on the agenda at the next meeting for action?
No.
Awesome,
Do we need action on it if it's?
is it
If it's
within?
a budget
amendment, right?
We don't have the,
We're not amending it though, right?
If we use your existing budget and you just make it work, then you're fine. If we're bringing money from HCC, there has to be a budget amendment.
Bring it back.
So,
Alan will guide that.
alright, are there any further direction that staff needs on that item? Nope. Okay,
Keep our guy.
I will accept a motion to
adjourn our work meeting to go to our regular meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We finished the work meeting agenda
Before our regular meeting.
excited.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, take a deep breath.
I appreciate it more than anything.
Well, in that case,